Welcome again to Joe Stunner Boxing. There are people in the world who, to whom the very idea, the very notion of government regulation is an absolute anathema. They hate it. They hate the idea of it, especially in America. I'm not talking about a particular government. I'm talking about the very concept of government. It somehow infringes on our freedom, and it's, they call themselves libertarians, maybe, but libertarian, of course, in America means the polar opposite of what it does in many other countries, especially underprivileged countries. But it's basically extreme right anarchy. It's a free for all. Society should be the Wild West. Society should be no regulation. No, we're all free to do what we want, to come and go as we please. Never mind the fact that you might have nothing, and therefore you have nothing to negotiate with, and therefore you're free to either take the few crumbs off the banquet table or starve in the street. But no, that's freedom. That's freedom. Okay. Now, I call bullshit on that notion. And I think boxing is a perfect example. And I'll give you a good example of what I mean. Moses Atama might well be the most talented teenager in boxing today. He's certainly one of them. He's 18 years of age. He's turned professional. He had 24 amateur fights. Who's he managed by? He is managed by, and I can't remember, I think it might be Francis Warren. If not Francis, then it's certainly George Warren. I think it's Francis, though. Have I got that right? I don't know. But it is, anyway, it is one of the Warren brothers. Who is Atama's promoter? Well, none other than their dad, Frank Warren. Now, that is a clear conflict of interest and a perfect example of why you need a body, preferably at government level, to come in and say, this is not acceptable, this is not fair. Moses Atama is an 18-year-old kid. He may be a very bright kid, he's clearly very talented, but he ain't got not a lot of life experience, and I'm guessing he hasn't got a lot of resources to fight any sort of skullduggery that goes on. And don't get me wrong, of course, when it comes to governments or corporations or charities or trade unions, there is always plenty of room for corruption to go on. I'm not arguing that. But at some point you need to say this has to be regulated in order for it to be a balanced playing field. I am not a libertarian in the American sense of the word. In America, libertarian means the polar opposite of what it does in many other countries, usually underprivileged countries. I don't believe that you should be free to do whatever you want, regardless of the impact on others. I do think there is such a thing as society, and whether it's boxing or any other industry, there should be regulation. If you don't have regulation, you get what we see now, which is, for example, oil companies making record profits, tens of billions. And yet in the UK, and I think it's the same throughout most of Europe and possibly in America, energy prices have never been so high. In the UK, they've shot up astronomically so. Okay, and yet you have the companies making record profits and trumpeting it and, giving all sorts of fat cats various, big fat bonuses. All right, that's not fair, to put it in playground terms. It's not fair. It's not right, because there is such a thing as society. There is such a thing as we are as a society, a collective, and therefore you shouldn't be allowed to trample people roughshod underfoot. No. I don't believe that. So in boxing, what's the answer? To me, it's that the government has to get involved. A proper sports body. I mean, there is a sports minister, but boxing, of course, as we know, is the the black sheep of the sporting so-called family. At least in America, and God knows the Americans are one of those nations who you've got an awful lot of very paranoid people who are just flat out paranoid about the very idea of government. At least over there, you've got the Alley Act, which says, okay, there is a conflict of interest potentially here. We're going to monitor it. And there are ways you can circumvent it. So, for example, Al Heyman is a promoter in all but name. You get someone to stand in for him, but he's essentially the promoter. Yeah, I get it. It's by no means perfect. If you want to say it's toothless, it's not strong, but I wouldn't say it's toothless, because at least it exists. at least if there is some conflict, there's somewhere to go to say, hang on a minute, this isn't fair. You're contravening the Alley Act. Over here, what have we got? We've got the British Boxing Board of Control, who evidently do nothing. You want someone who's toothless. The British Boxing Board of Control, they've got just about no money. They're dwarfed by the might of promoters, and yet they have an incredibly difficult job to do. And I know we all slag them off at various times, and with good reason frequently. But you can't say that theirs is a. I mean, it is a thankless task. You can't say it's an easy gig they've got. They haven't got an easy gig. So I think what we need is the sports minister to get involved in boxing and start drawing up a few bills that say, when it comes to issues like conflict of interest with management and promoter, PED tests, look at the clusterfuck that is. Fighters not getting paid on time, or in some cases not getting paid at all. You know, all of this stuff has to be done. It has to be regulated, and I can't think of a better way, even though it's by no means a perfect solution, I can't think of a better alternative to having someone at government level saying, okay, we're going to monitor this, we're going to regulate this. You know, and of course they would take, if they've got any sense, they would take their cue from the board who understand boxing, because there's probably not going to be a government minister that really understands boxing fully any more than they understand football or rugby or whatever. They may be a fan, but, you know, you've got to take your cue from the experts, and the board and its license holders. That's the important thing. It's license holders. When we think of the board, we think of, you know, Robert Smith and a few others. The license holders are the board. Fighters, promoters, managers, trainers, seconds, they're all license holders. So what we need is them steering the ship, but we need the weight, if you like, the armoury of a government level body helping boxing out, so that we can do away with a lot of this stuff which is badly marring our sport, and it's a sport we love. So what do you think? Leave your comments below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Like the video. If you didn't like the video, like it anyway. Be generous in life. Thanks a lot. Cheers. Appreciate your time. Bye for now.